According to one national poll of backyard gardeners, cucumbers are the second favorite crop for growing. In a poll conducted by the National Gardening Association, 86% of gardeners cited growing tomatoes as their favorite, and cucumbers came in number 2. So how do you grow and enjoy cucumbers? We've got the varieties, the growing techniques, the harvesting tips, and a lot more, including how to get rid of the bitterness of certain cucumbers. America's favorite retired college horticultural professor, Debbie Flower, has the tips. It's episode 396 of the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, Cucumber Success Tips. It's by popular demand, too, originally aired back in May of 2023. We're podcasting from the Barking Dog Studios here in the beautiful Abutilon jungle in suburban Purgatory. Let's go. A while back, we were talking about the top 10 vegetables that are grown by gardeners in these United States. And I was surprised to learn that the number 2 most popular vegetable grown in the United States are cucumbers. Who knew? I thought it would be peppers or maybe zucchini. No, zucchini was number 6. Sweet peppers were number 3. Cucumbers were number 2. I'm not a big fan of cucumbers, but I know someone who is.
Yeah. I love cucumber.
That would be Debbie Flower, America's favorite retired college horticultural professor who loves cucumbers.
I do.
And my heavens, cucumbers have a lot of problems. And I bet sometime this summer we're going to hear from people who say, what happened to my cucumbers? So the flowers look funny. The fruit looks funny.
Tastes bad.
Taste bad. What's going on? What's going on?
Yeah. Well, cucumbers are a vine, and so they need some space. They are in the cucurbitaceae family, and so they have boy flowers and girl flowers, and that's part of the pollination problem, and they need regular moisture. If you let the plants dry out between irrigations, that's when your fruit tastes bad. There's more and more breeding going on to prevent that. We're getting closer to being able to have more erratic watering, but basically you need to have, the soil needs to be moist, not wet, but moist all the time. So cucumbers are a warm season plant, a warm season annual. They need soil temperatures to be quite warm when you seed them, and you typically want to direct seed them, not start them ahead of time.
Sounds like zucchini.
Like zucchini, like melons, like pumpkins. Those plants are all similar in that when they get root bound in a container, it dwarfs them and they will never grow very big. And you do it once in your gardening life and you remember it, man. It's such a disappointment. So just tried my second time planting my cucumber seeds yesterday. I planted some old seeds, and that might be my problem. Seeds in general, you don't want to keep more than 2 years. And these were 2-year-old seeds. And I stored them correctly dry in the refrigerator over the 2 years, but they just didn't germinate. So yesterday I planted fresh seed. So I would advise starting with fresh seed. Plant them directly when your night temperatures have settled at 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. They need 6 to 8 hours of sun. That's considered full sun. And well-drained, fertile soil and regular moisture.
Can you grow them in containers?
You can. There are some bush-type cucumbers that are smaller and can be grown in containers. The containers should be pretty big.
15 to 25 inches?
Yes, half barrel.
Yeah.
Make sure they have drainage holes, and if they're a dark color on the outside, wrap them in aluminum foil. That's
there you go. Yeah.
Or paint them white, or put some light color on the outside somehow.
According to the cucumber heads at UC Davis, for containers, they like these cucumbers: pickle bush, potluck, Parks bush whopper, salad bush, space master, and bush champion.
Notice the word bush a lot.
Yeah, that tells you something about that. I would think, though, that much like zucchini, some early season disappointments with cucumbers would be you see the flowers, you get excited, but either there's no fruit, or what fruit develops doesn't look very good.
And doesn't last.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very small and it turns yellow and falls off. Right. That's because it has 2 types of flowers. It has the male flower and the female flower. And the flowers themselves, to the untrained eye, look exactly the same. But it's when you look at the stem that attaches the flower to the plant that you get your clue. A male flower is attached with a straight stem, and a female flower is attached with what looks like a baby cucumber. And the fruit will form if it gets pollinated. So actually the insides of the flowers are different from each other. One has the pollen and one has the stigmatic surface that receives the pollen and allows the pollination to occur and the fruit to form. So it's a morning job.
For whom?
For the pollinator, which can be bees or it can be you. And often this is another thing they've worked on a lot in breeding, so it isn't quite as pronounced as it used to be. But the first whole bunch of flowers used to all be males. Now it's the first few, and there were no females in sight. But the pollen has to be ripe, and the stigmatic surface has to be receptive, and there has to be a pollinator there to move the pollen from the boy flower to the girl flower. So it's a morning job. You can get up, go outside. I take off the male flower, take off the petals, and touch the tip of the male flower to the inside of the female flower. And that transfers the pollen, and then you're going to get fruit.
You don't even need an artist brush.
No, you don't.
No, that's pretty nifty doing that way. I would think, though, that weather plays a big part in it, too, that these flowers are only going to develop when the temperature is in a certain range.
Right. These are warm season crops. And so if you have very fluctuating temperatures, you may not get them.
If it's too cold or too hot,
right.
Either the male or the female won't cooperate.
Right.
It's probably the female that isn't cooperating.
I'd say the male.
Well,
I know they always want to play, but...
Yeah, we're always ready. But no, it's too hot and they get headaches, or something. I don't know. Blossom end rot. I wouldn't think blossom end rot would be a problem outside of tomatoes and peppers.
I've seen it on squash.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one growing it appeared in a compost pile, and I just let it grow, and it got blossom end rot. And that is, you'll read that it is due to calcium insufficiency in the fruit, and that's probably what it is. But in most cases, there's enough calcium available in the soil for plants to take it up. There's just not a regular source of water to take it to the plant roots. And so it comes back to regular watering again.
When choosing a cucumber variety, we talked about what's best for like a container, the bush types. Mm-hmm. But for consumption, what is the difference between a slicing cucumber and a pickling cucumber?
As far as I know, it's size. The pickling cucumbers tend to only grow to be cigar size or smaller, few inches, 4 to 6 inches, and not really fat. I don't know if anybody else remembers getting the cucumber out of the barrel in the local store.
Boy, for a second there, I thought you were going to say Cracker Jack box.
I never got one of those in a Cracker Jack box. You can, if you had that experience, you can picture the size of the cucumber. What we buy in the store now is all cut up in various ways. But I have pickled cucumbers that are regular slicing cucumbers, and I probably didn't get the texture that would be pickle connoisseur might look for because the amount of water in the fruit, et cetera, et cetera. But I just would pick them young and pickle them, or slice them and pickle them when there were a lot left.
One nice thing about cucumbers, because they require a warm soil in order to get started, they actually mature rather quickly.
Yeah, they're fast growers. They take off once they're out of the ground, as long as they have nutritious soil and about an inch of water a week.
So what, 2 months or so?
2 months to get a fruit, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, so you could plant in June and have cucumbers by the end of August.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's cucumber planting season then. Do you plant them the same way that you would plant zucchini or summer squash, 6 on a hill and then thin out to the strongest one, or ignore them?
I don't see discussion of the hill as much, but several in one location and then thin out, and then you need to space them. Depending on whether you're going to trellis them, they could be as little as 12 inches apart if you're going to grow a vining cucumber on a trellis, although I find that a little close, or letting them sprawl across the ground, in which they need to be 5 or 6 feet apart.
That brings up another good point. We have received a lot of emails in the past of people who grow cucumbers on trellises, and they seem to really like that.
Yes, I like that.
Tell us about that.
They have tendrils, which occur in the leaf node where the leaf is attached, and they can wrap themselves around something thin. They can't wrap themselves around, let's say, a piece of bamboo. That's a little too big, but something thin like a cattle panel or string. Some people make a structure and have string hanging down from it. And when they touch, it's a plant response to touch. They'll wind themselves around the trellis. If you don't have the right diameter thing for the tendril to twist around, you can always I used to use old stockings, which I don't wear anymore, to encase the fruit and tie it up, or to tie the plant itself to the structure that you're using as a trellis.
Here in the 21st century, we would use out-of-date USB cables.
There you go.
Yes.
Or I've seen, this is for melon, but baby underwear, children's underwear, to cradle the fruit.
Oh, that's clever.
Yes, I thought so.
Out at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center, they have repurposed some old umbrella frames. You know how umbrellas get torn in the wind, but the frame is intact. So they have mounted these umbrellas in the soil and run strings down from the bare arms around each, anchored the strings or small rope into the ground, and allow either beans or cucumbers or whatever to
very clever
spiral their way up to the top.
Nice.
I would think I would want something stronger, like you mentioned, a piece of cattle fencing or some sort of 12-gauge wire, 6-inch mesh, maybe even concrete reinforcement wire, which is a little flimsy.
Right.
But you could still do it that way.
One year I grew it on a trellis that went above my head. And of course the plant grew up there and then I couldn't reach the fruit. So beware. Okay.
Yeah. I wonder if it would work on a pallet that has been placed on an angle and supported by T-posts. We talked about that with Gail Pothauer recently, Master Gardener. She was using it to grow butterbelly squash.
Okay.
And it had no trouble attaching to the wooden slats of the pallet and crawled right up. Now, I don't know if a cucumber would do that, because you said it couldn't grip a
tendril, but a squash typically has a tendril as well.
Yeah.
So maybe the roughness of the wood leaves little splinters that they can wrap around.
Both for the plant and in your hand.
Yes, right.
All right. One question I've been getting a lot lately: should I prune off or snip off or pinch out the first tomato flowers that appear in order to get more tomatoes later on? Well, we tackle that question in the latest edition of the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter and podcast. Master gardener and vegetable expert Gail Pothauer joins us for that. Here's a hint to the answer. Not really. However, there are a few instances when pruning parts of your tomato plants can be beneficial. It's all in the June 13th, 2025 edition of the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter. It's entitled, Prune Tomato Flowers? This newsletter edition is available now in its entirety for both free and paid subscribers. Plus, paid subscribers have an added perk or two. We have a new Monday edition that's just for paid subscribers. Last week, it was all about tips for harvesting garlic and onions to allow those crops to last for months. Another benefit of being a paid subscriber to the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter: paid subscribers also have complete access to the previous posts of the newsletter, of which there are now over 200 editions. By the way, your paid subscription to the newsletter supports not only the ongoing efforts to produce the newsletter, it also helps keep the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast freely available each week. You can find out more information about the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter in several places. We'll have a link in today's show notes. You can find out more at our homepage, gardenbasics.net, or even go to farmerfred.com. And it's on Substack, so you can look there as well. And thank you for your support and encouragement to keep the good gardening conversation going. Let's talk about some cucumber pests that might come your way. According to the University of California's Integrated Pest Management site, among the invertebrate pests that can attack your cucumbers, it includes aphids, armyworms, crickets, cucumber beetles, cutworms, darkling beetles, dried fruit beetles, earwigs, flea beetles, grasshoppers, leafhoppers, leaf miners, loopers, nematodes, seed corn maggots, snails and slugs, spider mites, squash bugs, stink bug, thrips, whiteflies, wireworms. What are your favorites on that list?
Wowee, that's a lot of things.
Yeah.
A lot of those are sort of, I want to say, generalized pest problems like aphids. You'll see on many things. Cutworms are just like seedlings. And so when you plant the seed in the ground, you put a collar around it of some sort. I have this box of mini Dixie cups in my house, and I came across it and thought, what do I have that for? Well, I used to pop the bottoms out and put the little cup around the seedling, because cutworms, you have to push it into the soil. Cutworms travel near the surface of the soil over to the seedling and chew around the stem.
Do earwigs do the same? Earwigs get a bad rap because they are usually going after dead organic matter, and they're only going to go after a plant if there's nothing else there.
Yeah, right. If you don't have a lot of organic matter for them to eat, then they'll go after a plant.
Yeah,
right.
So a Dixie cup would solve that issue for that.
Well,
no?
I suppose so. I don't think they could get into. They climb. You find them in buds and things, but I don't know that they could climb a Dixie cup. The other thing my mother used to use was half toilet. The toilet paper tube that's left over when the toilet paper's gone.
And that's another way to trap earwigs as well.
Yes, it is. If you put moist...
Yeah, moisten it up and stick it in a dark place near where they are. They might just crawl in it.
They go in there during the day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that's a possibility. However, you bring up an interesting new sport that may take off in fraternities, which would be to take a Dixie cup, put it upside down, and have earwig races to see if they can crawl up and a Dixie cup, especially if it's actually placed upright over a plant, because that way they'd have to sort of
grow out.
Yeah, they'd have to climb out.
Right. And it's waxy.
Yeah. And, you could toughen it up by having a moat below that of vegetable oil that they would drown in.
Yeah. If they fell, that would be the end.
Yeah. So.
Right. There are traps for earwigs. Aphids, you hit them with a hard spray of water. And the thing, if you're growing on the ground, they are always on the back of the leaves. They may be in other parts of the plant too, but if you've got aphids on a cucumber, they're going to be on the back of the leaves. And that's a hard place to spray with water if you're growing on the ground.
Cucumber beetles seem aptly named.
Yes, they do. They do. And I can't say I've ever had them as a problem. But
they also have a lot of close relatives as well. The squash bugs go after that as well. And the problem with cucumber beetles is just glancing at it, you might say, oh, look at the cute ladybug. And it's not a ladybug. Right. It's a western spotted cucumber beetle. Right. And there are spotted ones and striped ones, and they can introduce a bacterium into the plant. So that is one that you really want to have some control over. Now, it says here, according to the University of California, that most older plants can support substantial numbers without serious damage. The best strategy for most vegetable gardens may be to place protective cloth over emerging plants and remove it when the plants are old enough to tolerate damage. There you go, row covers. Row covers, yes. Yeah, that would work for a lot of pests. Yes, it does. Keeps them away. Well, since we're on the subject of bad voodoo for cucumbers, the diseases that can strike cucumbers as they're growing in your yard with sad names like damping off, powdery mildew, downy mildew, phytophthora. Root rot. Wow. Oh, well, that's, again, I mean, they're susceptible, obviously, but that's a soil-borne disease that in areas where there's too much water. And we talked about having to water those cucumbers a lot, and there are some issues with it. One would be Phytophthora. Another would be Fusarium or Verticillium, which are also soil-borne. And if you know you have those problems, especially the Fusarium and Verticillium, you can get resistant cultivars. So look for letters like V, F, or N. Right, right. To avoid diseases. Right. Yeah. The Phytophthora is kind of, many plants get it, and you need a lot of standing water. Another plant problem for cucumbers is alternaria. It's a leaf spot. The older leaves will turn brown and get crispy and start to fall off. And that's due to that needs water. And many diseases do, bacterial and fungal, need standing water, meaning a droplet of water on the plant in order for the spore of the disease to germinate and enter the plant. And so if you're irrigating overhead, and I use micro emitters. I know you don't, but I do in my garden. And so it sprays on the plants. The plants do get wet. And so that wetness can allow the diseases to form. But I make sure that I water very early in the morning, and I live in a very dry climate. And so by the time the sun is up, I've just watered, and it dries up so fast that these diseases can't infect the plants. If you're in a much more humid place, that's not going to happen necessarily. You're not going to get that drying to happen. And you're probably going to get more rain, which can cause that water to be there for the diseases to form. And so you may need to increase your spacing so that the plant can get more airflow. And trellising would be a really good idea so that the plant can get more airflow and it can all dry out, and then look for those resistant cultivars. Yeah, I'm surprised at some of the recommendations on the back of some seed packets for cucumbers talk about thin them out so that they're 5 feet apart.
Yeah, well, that would be if you're not, I would think, if you're not trellising them.
Right.
Although the plants, we put them in and we've got these little tiny plants, but they get big by the end of the season.
Well, there's that too. And then there's the process of thinning them out. Much like zucchini is, I'm not going to hurt that little plant.
Right. People don't want to thin. Thinning should be cutting the plant at the soil level with a sharp tool like scissors or pruning shears, leaving the roots alone so that you're not disturbing the roots of the one you're keeping. And I don't know how many people I've said that to, and then I watch them pull the plant out and move it to someplace else. People
Successfully?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no.
Yeah.
People don't want to kill the plant, and I understand that completely, but realize I don't plant according to the package directions. I don't plant 3 to a hill and then take 2 out or whatever. If I'm suspicious that my seed is old and not going to grow very well, or it's something that's difficult to get to germinate, I will plant more than one, but then I'll come back and cut that puppy out, the extra one.
By the way, she doesn't literally mean a puppy.
No, I don't.
No.
I'll cut that plant out, but I don't like, some seed packages will say plant one every 2 inches and then come back and thin to every 12 inches. Like, really? I should regularly get rid of all these extra plants?
They're in business to make money.
They are. Realize that when you read the seed packet. Seed packets are wonderful. They have so much information. They're so worth reading. And I love reading them, but some stuff like that irritates me.
Yeah, I can understand that. One of the more common complaints about cucumbers, though, is as they mature and the folks go to bite into it, it's bitter.
Yeah.
What causes the bitterness and how do you get rid of it?
It's the irregular watering that causes the bitterness. And I've heard of all kinds of things, and I don't know if they're all old wives' tales or what, but it's pretty difficult to get rid of it. Removing the skin can help. I had a friend who said, cut off the end, just a little bit of the end, and then rub it back and forth over what's left, and you'll get this frothy stuff, and that gets rid of the bitterness. I'm not sure.
But there is something to cutting off the ends and taking the skin off.
Yes, yeah. That helps remove some of the bitterness. Not always all of it, though. So the bitterness occurs mostly in the stem end, so that's the end of the fruit that was attached to the plant, and the skin. So if you do get a bitter cucumber, and I've actually purchased one or two from the grocery store and then found them to be such, you want to take that stem end off and a little bit of the fruit and then peel the cucumber completely. And if it's still bitter, maybe peel another layer off.
So the stem end would be the end that doesn't come to a point. It would have a scar on it.
Right. A scar. Yes. Yeah.
And I would think, too, that harvesting when they're fairly young might help mitigate bitterness problems.
Sure, because it's a chemical that forms over time in the fruit, and the longer it stays on the plant, the more of that chemical that can form. So
slicing cucumbers probably 8 to 10 inches is harvest time?
Right, not. I grow Chelsea Prize, and they can get to be 15 inches.
If you go disappear for a day.
Yes.
Yeah. And the pickling types, even small, you'd harvest those about 3 or 4 inches.
You're right, little ones.
Yeah, okay. I imagine cucumbers do not play well with weeds either, so you do want to weed any patch where you're going to plant cucumbers.
Right.
Especially if it's bindweed or Bermuda grass.
The cucumbers are heavy feeders, and they want everything to themselves. They don't share well. You
haven't mentioned them all in one place, though, your favorite cucumber varieties.
I've done straight 8 quite a bit. But my favorite is Chelsea Prize. I try another one periodically, and then I come back to Chelsea Prize.
When we were talking to Gail Pothauer, master gardener and vegetable head, a few weeks ago about cucumbers, she likes to grow heirloom cucumbers, and her favorites were Green Fingers, Silver Slicer, Alibi, and the Armenian cucumber.
I don't like Armenian. I grew them one year, and I didn't like them at all. I don't know what it is about me and that one.
Burpless cucumbers, is there such a thing?
There are many that are marketed as burpless. I don't have the burping problem.
Okay.
So I can't attest to how effective they are.
Cucumbers, though, if you're fond of it, you can grow it. And then when you harvest it, I guess you can eat it fresh, put it into stir fry or make pickles.
Mm-hmm. Or salads. There are some good cucumber salads with dill and yogurt.
Okay. Why don't you just throw tuna in the mix, too?
Oh, that sounds good.
All right. Anything else on cucumbers?
If you're growing the cucumber, well, either trellising or on the ground, mulching the soil is a good idea. It helps retain the moisture that you have applied to the soil, slows down the loss of soil moisture from that soil. And we know we want that even moisture for the plant so that we don't get the bitterness. The other is if you are allowing the plant to grow on the ground, as a market farmer might do, because it takes more time and effort to trellis a cucumber. But you still will want to go around and maybe put some straw underneath each fruit so that they do not rot from touching that moist soil.
I'm waiting for your annual vegetable buying advice when you go to a nursery, how to pick out a cucumber plant.
Good
because
point.
It's not easy.
I prefer to direct seed them because if there are too many leaves, true leaves, on the plant, it's an indication the plant is root bound and it will never grow very big. So what's that mean? Often they're sold in a 3 or 4 inch pot. That's the distance across the top of the pot. And they often look like they've just germinated. So they will have what are called the cotyledons. They're 2 bean, like each one looks like a half of a bean. That's the seed food that came in the seed that the plant started from. And then they'll have what are the true leaves, which tend to have pointy tips to them, and they might be hairy. And I wouldn't buy anything with more than 3 true leaves. So it'd be 2 cotyledons plus 3 true leaves in a 3 or 4 inch pot. And if I'm feeling bold, I'll just knock that puppy out of the pot carefully, correctly, putting my hand over the top, my fingers around the stem, tipping the whole thing over as if I were pouring it out, squeeze the container and pull it off. The media will be fairly well knitted together by the roots, and look at that root system. If there are lots of roots on the outside of that bunch of media I just poured out, I won't buy that plant.
Especially if those roots are going round and round and round.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you really untangle a squash plant or a cucumber plant, or does that damage the roots?
That would damage the roots. Cutting the roots, which I do with great regularity on anything I plant, would also damage the roots. And at that, they just can't take it. I did it once. I probably started it myself in a container and put it in the ground, and the leaves never got bigger than my hand, and cucumber leaves can get very big, and the vine never got more than 3 feet long.
So again, with cucumbers, plant it directly. And regular water, very regular water.
Very regular water, yes.
I think, would that be a reason for bitterness as well, if it was irregular watering?
Yes, irregular watering, and the blossom end rot would be irregular watering. But you don't want water. It's sitting in water. You want it well drained. So if you have soil that retains a lot of moisture, like clay soil, make a mound and plant on the top of the mound.
I tell you what, those container-grown cucumbers sound better and better.
Yeah, easier, huh?
Yeah.
Except for the moisture. It's hard to keep a container moist.
Yes, it is. But again, a pot inside a pot.
Yes.
Can help. All right. Cucumbers, it's the number 2 most popular backyard garden vegetable grown. You might want to give it a try this year. Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you, Fred.
Garden Basics with Farmer Fred comes out every Friday. Garden Basics is available wherever podcasts are handed out. For more information about the podcast, as well as an accurate transcript of the podcast, visit our website, gardenbasics.net. And thank you so much for listening and your support.